Good evening. Welcome everyone to tonight's episode of Ask a Professor. We have a group of veterans with us here tonight. We have Rob Mukherjee and we have Dan Kelly back for more. So let's see what our first question is tonight.
My question is, does fate truly exist?
Does fate really exist? Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. So philosophers have thought about whether or not fate exists and how to understand fate for a long time. So one way to understand fate would be that there is an omniscient God, and God knows everything that has ever happened and is going to happen. And so there's a sense in which you're fated to do exactly what you do. But there's another way to understand it, which is just in terms of scientific determinism. So maybe all the particles in the world follow laws which just dictate where they are at any given moment in time. So not just our own fates, but the fate of everything in the universe is determined from the moment of the Big Bang. I think the jury's still out on the scientific version of that question, but there's another version of whether or not fate exists, which is just that character is fate. So whatever your character is kind of determines how you make your path through life. That's hard to argue with.
Yeah, Rob, what do you think?
Well, first of all, it's a great question. I think, I think it does, but we don't know it. And we don't know how to know it quite yet. If there's some philosophers have said destiny. Destiny is whether you make it yourself or it's predetermined for you. Is still a debatable question, and it is debated often. And so a fate depends on how you define fate. If you define it as the path that is supposed to be taken by you, but you don't know it. Yes, of course it exists, but I don't know. It's not known clearly as to what that path is going to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the concept of fate, it's interesting to think of the faith-based perspective and the science-based perspective. And fate is kind of neither. Like if you really chalk something up to fate, it's kind of in between, don't you think, a little bit?
The contrast class is usually, all right, am I fated to do this, or do I have freedom of choice? Can I choose not to do it, right? So if the flip side of this question about fate is really something about, can I chart my own path through life? Can I choose to do something, or has it always been in the stars from before I was born? And my view on this is, yeah, we have lots of degrees of freedom, but it's not a static thing. You can have different amounts of freedom in different political systems, or given different setups of your life, or how well you understand the situation that you're facing gives you degrees of freedom to respond to it.
There's a broad spectrum of opinion on this philosophically from different parts of the world, and it depends on the culture, depends on religion, and so on. And I can say that, yes, I'm going to chart my course, I'm going to make this choice. But if one can argue that, well, the fact is that you made that choice was in your fate. So it becomes a tautological explanation. So it's out there. It's a philosophical question. It's best to me, it's assuming that it does. I don't know what exists, what it is.
I think another aspect of the fate question, you all are thinking like really big picture and freedom of choice, and I think that's a big part of it, but there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal recently about scientists who study coincidences, which is sort of connected to fate, right? The idea that things happen that don't seem to have any rational connection, but that really do. And it didn't really come to any conclusions. But it did remind me of a lot of times when something seems to happen as if it had a purpose, when there doesn't really seem to be any reason for it to have had a purpose. And they actually gave a list of some of the times that people chalk things up to interesting coincidences. And I had one of these happen the other day, and it may give our viewers some insight into the way things work with garbage collection at Purdue. But I don't know about your buildings. In Beering, several years ago, they decided there would not be any more garbage cans in offices. Do you have this?
Yeah, I have a recycle thing, but not
yeah. So we all have recycling bins, but no garbage cans. So my daughter was with me visiting campus, and she asked if she could throw something away in my office, and I said, no, that's just for recycling. She was like, what do you mean? That's just, what are you supposed to do with garbage? I said, well, there's a big trash can out in the hall, and you go take it there. And we left my office 30 seconds later, got out into the hall, and one of my colleagues had a potato chip can that she was clearly using in her office as a garbage can, and she was dumping it into the trash. And like, that's one of those weird coincidences. I've never had that conversation about the garbage. I've never known my colleague had a potato chip can that she was using as a garbage can, and there it was. And so the point of this article is just that a lot of it is just, you know, things can randomly happen in concert with one another, just the way they can randomly happen in total difference. But I think there, you know, there's the kind of big, do I have control over my life question about fate, and then there's the, man, I just missed getting hit or something. Is that my fate, or was that just, it's a good thing I got
Another
delayed
way of
by
looking
10
at it
seconds.
is that you have, let's say you have a question in front of you and you're trying your, you know, hacking your brains out, you never get the answer to the question for years and years and years. But on the other hand, someone else had the same question and the answer is right in front in a snap. So is it fate?
Yeah.
Chance. I think chance is a very important element. And the chance theory is a very important element in this.
So I'm not sure we came to any conclusion about fate, but you got to hear some of our thoughts. Let's hear a message now from our sponsors.
What are we doing for life? What are you doing with your life? Boilermakers forge a revolution for humanity. Research to stop cancer. Knowledge to spark a business. Hands-on learning to heal the real world. When you're open to being a change maker, willing to work harder to transform lives, then you're ready to make life better. Health and Human Sciences at Purdue University.
Wow. Escapes to the end zone. Touchdown, Boilers.
That allows Bentley to just make a play in the backfield.
Welcome back. Let's find out what the next question is for Ask a Professor tonight.
Where does your self-worth come from?
Where does your self-worth come from? Rob, where do you get your self-worth?
Well, for me, I think self-worth comes from how you feel that you have contributed to this world in your lifespan. That also means how others perceive you in terms of what you have contributed to the public good. And so self-worth is not, to me, is not an utility-oriented thing. I mean, the value of wealth is far less than value of knowledge and contribution to the society. And so, therefore, I think if I look at my self-worth, I would look back, sit back and think about the things that I've done to improve the life of others or add to the public good, service, that have made a difference. And that, I think, becomes the foundation of my self-worth.
Okay. Dan, how about you? Where does yours come from?
I was wondering if we were supposed to interpret this question personally or just about where anyone's self-worth could possibly come from.
How about both?
Yeah, so one of the great things of being human is you have lots of flexibility, right? So different people draw self-worth from different places, and people can invest a lot of themselves in various groups or projects or different things like that. I think for me, one of the most useful ways to think about questions like this comes from a number of philosophers, but Nietzsche's the one that comes to mind right now. By the time I get to my old age and I look back on my life, I want my biography to just be awesome, right? So I want it to be full of really interesting experiences, and interactions with great people and service to something bigger than myself, which I think is worthwhile, and I want to think I injected good into the world. And but I also want to have seen everything the world has to offer, and so a lot of my self-worth derives from the fact that I'm living a story that other people would want to hear about.
Okay. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting that our self-worth is also related to how we think we're going to look to somebody else, right? Or
definitely.
And I think that's a big part of it. I think about my parents. I mean, where did my self-worth come from? I think my parents made me feel important and special and loved when I was little. And I realize not everybody has that that good fortune, but that certainly got me started. And
Yeah, it's another way of saying that you understand. or you have a good feeling for why you exist. And at the end of life, like you said, take stock and say, I exist, I existed, and I still do. And my existence has been manifest in these ways.
I mean, one interesting distinction or sort of dimension that you could think about this on is whether or not your self-worth is imposed from without, or whether it's something that you generate yourself. I mean, I think the right answer's got to be some combination of both.
It's a combination of both. It's a combination of both.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Because the environment has an input to the process.
Sure.
And your own philosophical makeup has the other part of it.
Yeah. And there's the Whitney Houston answer: learning to love yourself.
Yeah, learning to
It
love
is the
yourself,
greatest
yeah.
love of all. I don't know. I think there are lots of different philosophers. We might as well bring her into it as well. And we've talked about this in other programs, but faith is another thing that I think that helps people have self-worth. It's connected to that being part of something that's bigger than yourself, feeling like you, because of what you believe in, that gives value to your life and to your existence and gives you a reason for being and existing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty heavy stuff. Let's take a commercial break and think about it.
So the Brian Lamb School of Communication has a long tradition as a department of communication originally, so well over 100-year tradition.
There has been communication here and the teaching of speech and organizational communication and other things for decades.
We have a very vibrant, I think, curriculum for our students in 5 different areas of communication.
It's everything from human relations and communication about relationships to public relations to communication within organizations to video production.
I think we attract really a variety of students who are interested in learning about communication skills, but then also being able to use those skills in a variety of settings.
Students have a lot of chances to get real, practical, applied experience, hands-on learning.
The classes that I've taken have definitely helped me grow in the career that I want, and I could not imagine taking any of these classes anywhere else.
I think a great part of our curriculum is when we have alumni who come back to classes and talk to students.
The networking is incredible through this program. We're all over the nation and even all over the world. I've actually had an internship where a Purdue grad was working there full time, and it was at Warner Brothers Studios.
I think when people hear about Purdue University, their first thoughts are probably engineering and astronauts. I'd like for students who aren't necessarily interested in being astronauts or engineers to also think about Purdue, but in terms of the Brian Lamb School of Communication.
Also very excited to see what my future holds because of Purdue, and I know I'm fully prepared because of the Brian Lamb School.
We're back with more Ask a Professor. Let's hear the next question.
I've been thinking a lot with the Harvey Weinstein situation that came up in the news, and even the thing with the Hollywood access bus with Trump last season. How can we do a better job educating ourselves on how to interrupt those patterns when they happen? And how do we prepare ourselves with what we want to say to set boundaries and to make sure that even those small day-to-day interactions don't continue to occur, that we don't wait for it to be an assault before we say, hey, that's not appropriate. So how can we do a better job of teaching ourselves and our daughters and our sons how to have those conversations?
Okay, so I think the question here is, how is sexual harassment still happening? What can we do to stop it? Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, and I suspected someone would ask about this. So, I mean, one of the things that seems to have been extremely effective, at least in raising awareness, which I think is a huge step, is the #MeToo campaign. So all of my social media has just been awash with women telling their stories, and even in some cases men telling stories of being sexually harassed or sexually assaulted. And on the one hand, that's great. I mean, it's got to be traumatic to relive those experiences by telling other people about them. But I think it's been sparking conversations, which are a necessary part of any kind of forward movement. So some of the stuff I've read about this makes an interesting distinction between mutual knowledge and common knowledge. So mutual knowledge is everyone knows something. But common knowledge is everyone knows something, and everyone knows that everyone else knows it too. And I think that part of what the Me Too campaign is helping do is not just that everyone knows about one or two instances of harassment or assault, but now everyone knows that everyone else has been involved with this stuff, and it is really systemic. And so maybe we can start thinking about ways to tap it down and minimize it.
Rob?
I think the answer is a very good one. But if you look at it, this problem, we've been seeing this problem for many, many, many years. Maybe of late, I don't believe that the problem existed less in the past. They probably just were not expressed as much in the past, or not noticed as much in the past, or people didn't come forward. They're doing that now, which is a good thing. But I think more dialogue and more civil dialogue to create a workplace ethic is a very important element in professional life. Now, yes, there are perpetrators, and when the perpetrators are actually caught, there ought to be consequences. That's one part of it, that we have consequences to demonstrate that this behavior is not acceptable. But you can approach it that way, that okay, we'll prosecute everybody, or how can we prevent it? That's the real question. I think that is through education, through discourse, through dialogue, through sharing with each other's experiences, and be civil about it. I think activist kind of type of movement essentially polarizes people. I think we have to bring people together to think about it together, and it's not something that will happen overnight. Where we are at, it's still going to take a long time to get there, and there will be some who are not going to get there. Human mind is something that I'm not going to be able to predict anyway. But human behavior, often these kinds of acts are acquired behavior. They must have had an experience themselves, or they have seen something like that happen. So they think, well, if it happened before, I can do it too. But getting away with it time and time again gives someone a level of confidence that I can get away with it more and more. I think that needs to stop. So basically it's more communication and more education about this, how to prevent this thing. But in a collective way, in a constructive way, with mutual understanding of what we know this to be, and all of us taking a responsibility of avoiding and preventing it.
And of course, we've got three guys sitting around the table talking about this. So I guess we're the ones that should, right? Because we're the ones that bear the responsibility for this kind of thing. You think, Dan?
I think, by and large, that's definitely right. But the elephant in the room here is a power asymmetry. So I think one of the things that has allowed Weinstein to keep doing his thing for so long was that he was in a position of power. There needs to be more women elevated to position of power so they can be viable role models for the next generation coming up, and people can model themselves on them, and then you don't have power all consolidated in the place where this sort of behavior can continue to be excused again and again and again. That's part of the issue here. So I think struggles towards inequality, and civil behavior is great, but power isn't given away, it's typically taken. So I think there's inevitably going to be some friction throughout all of this. And a good healthy debate on civil terms, excellent, terrific.
But I think the power question is a very important one, because people in power position feel that they can do it and they can get away with it.
And they do it and get away with it.
And they're used to it.
And those who are not in the power positions, they become the victims because they don't, because they fear that it's going to happen, and it does happen. So I think one of the solutions is that developing more equity in power, more gender equity in power, and gradually it's going to get there. Even today, if you look at Fortune 500 companies, how many of them have women CEOs?
Not many.
Not many, and maybe a few more now than 15 years ago. So it's still a matter of time. But until it happens, there needs to be every company, every CEO, every management has really to focus on educational programs, and not just once, repeatedly, repeatedly.
It's still kind of shocking, isn't it, that something like this still happens. I mean, it's good that I think stories like this happen because they remind, especially, I think, guys that can be complacent about this, that this is still a real thing, that people, even people that appear to be people with a lot of self-confidence and maybe not as much power, but influence themselves, can still be preyed to, which is a terrible thing and a good reminder.
Right. So, I mean, for educating ourselves and calling out bad behavior when you see it in a non-aggressive way, I think it's got to start on the ground, but hopefully it'll percolate up too.
Yep, we can hope. All right, before we hear our last question for tonight, let's take one more commercial break and we'll be right back.
Where can I get a degree that will give me a theoretical knowledge but help me to apply it?
That the curriculum is different from most of the other colleges on campus.
All hands-on. I get to do a lot of lab work. I get to work with stuff. I get to make things.
You're always working with your hands and you're actually doing the stuff instead of sitting in a classroom just hearing about all of it.
You get to know professors and other staff on an individual level.
Willing to do anything they can to help you succeed.
One-on-one learning experiences focus on problem solving, how to learn, how to think.
Actually having clients and actually working with them.
My internship was with Apparatus Infrastructure Services.
Internship with Procter & Gamble.
I'm doing an internship this summer at Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance.
When I went to my internship, and it was so easy to apply what I learned in class.
I'm in my capstone project. It's kind of like a senior design. End of the year, I'm graduating. Let's see what I can do with all the things that I've learned.
Extremely diverse.
It's a very global and diverse environment.
We're in smaller classes. We get to work on our own projects very often.
Finding this team, this perfect team.
I've really enjoyed learning a lot more about proper persuasive techniques.
I've gained so many leadership skills.
I've become really good at actually giving oral presentations now.
And I've really sort of come out of my shell.
I can utilize both of these majors and get well-rounded in these areas.
If you're thinking about coming to Purdue Polytechnic, do it.
Purdue has so many opportunities for you.
You're going to grow not only just by your academics and your skills, but you're going to grow as a person.
I want to be that person that inspires a child to go in technology.
You just have so many opportunities here that you're not going to find anywhere else.
We're back, and we're ready to answer our final question of the night.
So why do you think that we dream?
Why do we dream? What do you think?
I thought she asked why we drink.
Was it drink or dream?
Well, I thought maybe the question was why do we drink?
Dream.
Okay. I wanted to ask the other one.
There may be a relationship between the two of those. Who knows?
What do you think about dreams? Why do we do it?
Why do we do it? First of all, I think we need to understand what dream is, and dream.
Let's start. None of us are sleep scientists.
We are not sleep scientists. We are not going to analyze sleep behavior or dream behavior. But I can dream about a future. That's a different kind of dream. Or I'm dreaming something at night, which becomes a pleasant dream, or it becomes a nightmare. I don't think we can predict what the dream is going to be. But oftentimes, it has been said that the dreams begin to represent certain kinds of experiences that you may have had, maybe now, a long time ago, but it takes a different kind of metaphor to express that. And sometimes that's why you don't know, why did I dream it that way? Maybe there's an explanation, but we cannot figure it out. It's a very different kind of metaphor. So what we retain in our brains through our experiences is a very mysterious thing. And so we dream. I mean, it's not only that we dream, even animals dream, dogs dream. And so it is something that's experiential and a way of perhaps playing it out in ways that are highly metaphorical.
What do you think?
I mean, so another interesting question is why we sleep at all. And there's interesting theories happening right now, or being explored right now, that as your brain does its usual everyday activity, it sort of builds up a kind of trash between the neurons. And then when you sleep, it's your brain sort of taking the trash out, getting rid of it and cleaning out the lines. Why we dream while we're also sleeping is a really interesting question. So, I mean, so there's daydreaming. People daydream as well. And that's, it's what happens when you're not really focused on any stimulus in your immediate environment. So there's this part of your brain called the default mode network that starts putting together pieces that wouldn't have been put together otherwise. And it's sort of this free-ranging synthetic, activity, which is why a lot of stuff that you kind of care about or you've kind of been thinking about can pop up into your daydreaming, and then it all of a sudden makes sense. So similar to what you were saying, we have all this kind of cognitive detritus sloshing around in our head, and dreaming is just part of the whole process of working through it and sort of processing it in a way of that isn't really directed or goal-oriented or stimulus-driven in any way. It's just kind of the system humming along and seeing what it has to chew on.
Yeah. Sometimes I think certain things have created an impression on you. Through dreams, you start making some connections. And those connections may be very surprising to you, or to anybody for that matter. And interestingly, those connections that you make, again, makes you think. And that drives another dream, often. It happens.
But do you remember your dreams? Like, I wonder, there can't be that much of an evolutionary benefit to dreaming if most people don't remember most of their dreams, unless it's doing something that's way lower level.
Well, for myself, yes, I do remember a number of dreams for myself. I've even had dreams that continued the next time I slept. That's bizarre, right?
Serial dreams.
Serial dreams. Yeah. I even have that. And when I say this to other people, they say, yeah, you're crazy. Well, no, I can connect 3 dreams and 3 nights about the same subject matter following serial dreams. Now, why is that? Something probably preoccupied me for a long, long time about an issue, and it's trying to massage it in a way that I can express or I can understand it. And so it takes its time. But the other question is, yes, the brain's processing all this debris that's going out. And maybe the process of going out is renewing itself, and during that time, what is still retained starts to interconnect.
Yeah, I think of dreams sort of the way that you can think a lot faster than you can speak or read or type or anything else, and so you've always got this processing power that's greater than the task that's right in front of you. And I wonder if sleep is kind of that way. Like, sleep just doesn't take all the brain's powers, and so it's got to keep doing something else. I don't know. And there's always the Disney definition, a dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep.
Yeah, that's touching.
But people sleep. Some people sleep only 4 hours. Some people sleep 12 hours. Do they dream more or less? Who knows? I mean, some people daydream more other than others. But dream is kind of a phenomenon that I don't think is clearly definable.
Yeah, I was reading a book recently where it was some science fiction kind of setting, and the way people knew something was wrong was that they quit dreaming. They started comparing notes. Have you had any dreams since we've been staying in this place? Something's seriously wrong. So I do think there's this sense that even if we don't remember them very long, we have some sort of belief that it must be important, because if we didn't do it, I think we would miss them. So some great questions over a large range of topics tonight. We thank you for everybody who joined us. As always, thanks for asking those questions. If you see one of our crews on campus, be sure to come up with a good question for us to talk about. Check us out on Facebook or YouTube at Ask a Professor. I'm Josh Boyd. Have a great night.